So when the new Delta Force game was announced back in August 2023, I was all for it. Myself being someone who mainly plays like tactical or hardcore shooters, we haven't really had anything new in quite a while, so knowing that this old franchise was being like remade or a new game was coming out was great news. And then I saw the announcement trailer and we saw recon arrows and little drones creating smoke and someone doing the Leroy Jenkins and powering himself up. I had a sour taste in my mouth. I really didn't like it. It felt like it was just going to be like another Call of Duty clone or Battlefield clone. But I kept my eye on the game because ultimately it's a first-person shooter and I like first-person shooters. And recently they've had the technical alpha test and I managed to get in and play it. So now that I've put a good amount of hours into it, it's time to tell you what I think of it. And when the game actually releases, there's going to be 3 modes to it. Havoc Warfare, which is the traditional standard sort of multiplayer mode, which is more along the lines of like a Battlefield style game. There's Tactical Turmoil, I think it's called, which is the extraction mode. And a campaign, which is a reimagining of the Delta Force Black Hawk Down campaign from that old game. In the technical alpha test, there was only the 2 multiplayer modes available. So we'll start with Havoc Warfare, the traditional sort of Battlefield style mode. And we'll start with some negatives first. Now, this is a sort of modern day hero shooter. So kind of like Battlefield 2042, you don't pick a class to play, you pick a hero to play and then choose your loadout for that hero. Now what this leads to in the game is that everyone looks the same. Everyone on your team, if you pick the same hero, you're going to look the same. There's probably going to be different skins when the game fully releases, but the enemy team look the same against your team. And I think that's terrible. I don't know why developers just don't make it so the enemy team are just like a generic sort of soldier skin. And that soldier skin can be unique to that hero, but it's like a generic soldier. So then your team is full of like the hero characters and the enemy team are generic enemies that can still easily be, identified as to what hero that player is actually playing as. Because what Delta Force has to do is have some sort of UI element to help you quickly tell friend from foe. And what this leads to is, you'll see an enemy and you'll see like a friendly icon above their head, like a bright icon with their name. You look at an enemy and it shows you the same thing. It can just lead to like a messy UI, or you put glowing lights on the enemy and it still just doesn't look quite right. And during the game, I did shoot at friendly soldiers a few times because you see someone out the corner of your eye, you quickly, twitch over to them to shoot them, but there's no friendly fire, so it doesn't do anything, but it's still an issue, right? They should just make it so the enemy team are like generic people, so they do stand out as actually being the enemy. Now in this multiplayer mode, there was only 2 maps available. Cracked, which is like the desert-y one that you're probably seeing on screen now, and this other one, which I've completely forgot the name of, and I can't actually find the name of this map online. Now on Cracked, there was some really odd map limits. Like at one point, the limit of the map, like the actual area you can play before you go out of bounds, ended like on a street. It didn't go up to like a building, it was just somewhere along the street. And also on this map, there were other map limits that you can abuse a bit. So you could run out of bounds of the map to then sneak around and climb over a wall to flank the enemy. This sort of stuff really needs to be looked at because it's just not good. And really, those negatives are the only negatives I actually had about this multiplayer mode. Because generally, Delta Force Hawk Ops really surprised me. So first, let's talk about the gunplay. Now, the gunplay doesn't use bloom, which a lot of casual shooters do. If you don't know what bloom is, basically you'll be ADS in your weapon, you'll shoot at a target, and the bullet will just go off to the side somewhere, or above where you're hitting, or below, or somewhere random, because bloom is basically just like a random bullet deviation. Every Battlefield game uses this, apart from Battlefield 5, and Bloom is terrible. Any shooter I play that uses Bloom is an automatic maximum 5 out of 10 game, because Bloom is terrible, doesn't reward actual good gameplay or good user skill, because you can quickly twitch to someone's head and shoot and your bullet will just miss because Bloom, basically. But the weapons all felt quite punchy and really viable. Like, I used a pistol a few times and actually beat people in combat. I never used a shotgun though, so I can't comment on that, but if the shotgun isn't a one-hit kill in close quarters, then that's terrible and I need to change that. But I used the SMG a few times as well, and yeah, at range it's not as good as an assault rifle, but it's still a good weapon. The time to kill felt pretty decent for this style of game. It is a casual shooter, it's not a tactical shooter at all, but the time to kill, yeah, it felt right. Now, talking about the heroes, I've already talked about how having them just be the same on both teams isn't great, but their abilities are generally pretty good. The main hero that I played was this bow chick, and her abilities, well, she has a frag grenade, which is an ability, a recon arrow, which can act as like a little mini UAV, and an electrified arrow, which you can use like a area of denial ability because it causes damage and I think it explodes. And it means you can also, if you get a good placement on it, kill people behind cover. Now, all the heroes are quite unique, they all have different abilities, and I think if you use the heroes together, they are really well sort of tuned, I think it feels like. I think they're just really good. And they're not Battlefield 2042 cringe, like all the weird voice lines, and they're not cringy just like 2042. They've really dialed it down a bit, although the bow chick that I played at literally does say like no cap and stuff like that though. She's probably the only one who talks like that, but generally, yeah, they're pretty good. And the movement, it's not like an overly spastic speed like Call of Duty. Yes, you can double sprint, but it's not extremely fast. You're not going to get people double sprinting, jumping in the air, slide cancelling stuff. Only one hero can actually slide, which is the assault guy. And I think it generally helps to make the game like feel more grounded. I never felt while playing this game that someone was moving too fast. It felt just quite right. Now the maps, yeah, I said there's 2 maps in the game. Cracked, this sort of deserty urban one, and I think Cracked was the best map out of the 2. It felt like a really great map to play. It gave me almost like Karkand vibes. It's not as good as Karkand, but it's definitely the strongest map of the 2, despite it having a couple of like odd map limits which can be abused or just are really strange. They generally had like a good flow to it. You start outside of the main urban environment before moving in and having mainly like a little city fight. Just had a good flow. And some of the walls, I would say, are destructible. Buildings aren't destructible, like in older Battlefield games, but there were some walls that are. But the destructibility is quite scripted. If you remember the first Bad Company game, which actually introduced destruction to the Battlefield series, when you would destroy a wall, you would destroy a like perfect square of that wall, not like specifically where you actually hit the wall or with what type of explosive, and that's kind of how it works in this game. But it works well, it's not like overly destructible. Yeah, the map is still going to be the map, and yeah, I mean, it's fine. But the other map, which I could just never remember the name to, it is also a pretty decent map. It starts like way more open compared to Cracked, but then you go into like a cave and like inside a mountain base scenario before going on top of the mountain fighting around a big radar dish, which is more like a mid-range and close quarters map. Again, yeah, it's a solid map, definitely a different flavour to the other one, and it has more vehicles compared to Cracked. More, well, actual tanks. There's no tanks in Cracked, and there's helicopters as well. One thing to mention is the player count for this mode. It's 64 players, which is 32 v 32. Some people are going to be disappointed by that because we recently had Battlefield 2042, which can go up to, or originally did, I think, went up to 128 players. But the problem with 2042 was that the maps just weren't good enough for the player count size. But in this game, I think it's like pretty much perfect, these two maps are, in terms of the player count with the map size and how the maps flow. But in general, the gameplay, it was really fun to play. It can be chaotic at times, and yeah, the heroes can really work together well with their abilities. I think this mode will surprise people because for me, I mean, I generally play these tactical, hardcore, slow-paced games. I had a hell of a lot of fun playing this mode for Delta Force Hawk Ops. But let's now go on to the extraction mode. I was really interested in playing this mode because I do like my extraction shooters. I played a hell of a lot of Marauders when that first came out. Hunt Showdown is probably my most played game of last year and this year. There's just something about extraction shooters that I like. It's just a good evolution, I think, of Battle Royale. But I didn't play a lot of this extraction mode, and I think that's because of the queue times I was having. Generally just a lot of long queue times. I'm not sure if it was because there wasn't a lot of people playing it, or if there were back-end issues, because the devs did say there were some queue issues, which they are actually looking at. Now this mode actually plays a little bit differently to the Conquest mode. You still pick a hero to play as, but you don't have access to all their abilities. You don't actually unlock the abilities or anything, some are just locked out. Now I only played as the bow chick in this mode. One of her abilities in the Conquest mode is to put down a spawn point, and you cannot put down the spawn point in the extraction mode. I don't know about every other character, but I don't think everything will be available. I know that you can play as the medic hero and you can use their medic heal gun thing. So when you play in a group of people, getting a variety of heroes will be key, because having that medic guy just to be able to heal people up is going to be so important instead of having to stand there and use a healing item. Now in this mode you can't actually double sprint like the main Conquest mode, which I think is good, and you also have a stamina bar, so you need to manage that a little bit. Now one major positive it has against every other extraction shooter, or nearly every other extraction shooter, is that it doesn't have food and water meters. Yes, you can actually play this game for 20 or 30 minutes without drinking or eating and not dying. Now, I think food and water meters literally add nothing of value as a gameplay experience to any game. Now, some people who play a lot of survival games will counter this and say, oh, well, in a survival game you need to eat and that. Well, yeah, that's true, but you're just babysitting a meter. It generally adds nothing positive to the gameplay experience, and especially in these types of games, you can actually, survive a extraction game which is going to last like 20 to 30 minutes without eating and drinking, right? You can usually go maybe a good few hours, right, at least, and not eating or drinking, you still won't die. So I don't know how developers don't actually understand this. You could probably jump into a game of Tarkov at full food and water, and if you don't eat or drink during that raid, you'll probably end up dying. It's fucking ridiculous. But this mode generally does play like a traditional extraction shooter. You have a home base, which you can upgrade by getting materials. You can just navigate your home base just by using the menus and not having to actually run around the place. But you get quests, you go into a map and actually try and do the quest. Now this game has a lot of quality of life additions to it compared to other extraction shooters. So when you actually open up your map, it does actually tell you where you are on your map, and it shows you points of interest such as safes, other small missions you can pick up, the extract locations and requirements, if any, for those extract locations. It's just really good, right? And lootable items or containers around the game world are highlighted when you get close, so you don't have to spend ages looking around a room to see if something's lootable. The quality of life stuff is so important, and many extraction games forget this. Tarkov. All this means is that generally you can play this game on one monitor. Where if you was to play something like Tarkov, you'll probably need a second one to have a wiki open or a map open to let you know what's going on. This plays really well. As I was running around in my first extraction mode, I did pick up this kill VIP type mission to go along with the other missions from like my main base. Luckily there was a group of other players in this location. They killed the guy I was meant to kill, but I still got reward for it, which is good. And I think these little missions you can pick up during a raid just helps to add a little bit of variety to them. And if you went into a raid just to get some loot or try to find some certain items to upgrade something, you could still pick up a little mission just to get an extra bit of reward. It's just good, right? Another big plus is that when you first go into this mode, you actually play through a mini tutorial, which actually teaches you about the game and about looting and healing and all that sort of stuff, which is a huge plus. Again, like many hardcore games, don't include tutorials because, I don't know, maybe they seem to think that it makes the game more hardcore if it doesn't tell you how to play it, which is wrong. It just makes it less accessible. Having a more accessible game doesn't mean it's not as hardcore. It just means people can get into it and understand the game easier, which is better, right? But in conclusion, with Delta Force Hawk Ops, like I said at the beginning of the video, I really didn't like the look of this game when I saw the announcement trailer, but I was really surprised by how much I actually enjoyed playing this game, both of the modes. I really wanted to play more of the extraction mode, but I just couldn't, unfortunately. And I'm really looking forward to playing this more when the next test comes or when it releases. And hopefully I can stream it more if I get my stream PC sorted out, because it's just dead, unfortunately. But this game, it's really, really solid. And I had no performance issues at all running on max settings. And I also didn't notice any bugs, which is extremely rare for any game. And this was a technical alpha test. So I think when this game like fully releases, it's going to be extremely solid and really polished. Let me know what you guys think about this game down in the comments below, if you played it during the test or not. Give this video a like if you liked it, dislike if you didn't. Thank you for watching, and subscribe for more.